You know, there came a point in my life where I was convinced that there is a possibility that Michael Venom Page could beat any MMA striker that ever stepped foot on this earth. And it's not that he does it the best, because when you look at his point fighting background, I'm pretty sure there are a whole bunch of other guys who did it way better than he did. Take Raymond Daniels, for instance. They've competed on multiple occasions, and Daniels got the better of them in most, if not all of them. But when it came to MMA, it's pretty clear that MVP's style of point fighting translated a lot better than Raymond Daniels. If Raymond Daniels was to become an MMA fighter full time, I highly doubt he would have as much success as MVP did. While I do want to explore the possibility of MVP being the most effective striker of all time, I still don't think it's something that I can assert because he simply hasn't proved it. But at the same time, it hasn't been disproven, so there's still a chance that it might be true. The reason being, he hasn't really faced the best competition. He's had a lot of favorable matchups. When you just look at his move to the middleweight division, it wasn't warranted. He didn't clear out the welterweight division. He didn't become champ. I guess the UFC was trying to prevent him from fighting grapplers like Sean Brady, Bilal Muhammad, because there's always a chance that they could beat him. So they moved him up to the middleweight division. And the middleweight division has always been viewed as one of the more weaker ones, but it's just getting better and better every single day, or at least more well-rounded. We have guys like RDR, Nazardine Imavov, Caio Borralho, Anthony Hernandez, Hamza Chimaev, Dricus du Plessis. I could go on, really. And I think MVP would probably lose to any of those guys who can grapple. Even if they aren't that good, it takes a competent grappler to beat MVP. This has been his kryptonite before and after he joined the UFC. The guys that had success against him in Bellator were Logan Storley and Douglas Lima. The Logan Storley fight, I personally felt like it was a bit of a robbery because Logan was literally just hugging him. He didn't do anything. He barely landed any ground and pound. And MVP was actually the one who had a little bit of success. Not enough to convince the judges, but enough to convince me because he did more damage, and this is a damage-based sport. But the simple fact that Logan was able to control him for so long, that was definitely not a good look for MVP. And I'm not saying he's still the same version now. Of course, his takedown defense is probably a lot better. Douglas Lima also had a lot of success, especially in the second fight. I thought that one was a robbery, and Douglas was the rightful winner because, again, damage-based sport. I felt like he was able to do some damage on the ground. I literally counted significant strikes. I've made 1 or 2 videos on this. You should go check them out. But hey, man, I'm not correct about anything. It's just my opinion, and I'm open to correction. Even in the UFC, he was taken down by Kevin Holland. Kevin couldn't do that much with it. MVP was taken down by Ian Gary, controlled to a decision. And yeah, Ian Gary had a lot of success controlling him. He couldn't complete the submission, but let's not act like Ian has a lot of submissions on his resume. It shouldn't be that much of a surprise. Ian is a striker, and his striking was nullified against MVP. And I felt like Ian could have entertained longer striking exchanges, but Ian is another high IQ fighter, so he'd much rather play it safe. He knew that MVP had a hole in his game, that being his grappling, so he resorted to that. Would Ian Gary have some success on the feet if he did keep it standing for longer? Probably not, man. We all saw that overhand MVP landed on Ian, and after that, Ian was like, nope, I'm not striking this guy. I'm shooting for relentless takedowns. And that says a lot because Ian Gary is one of the best strikers in the UFC, one of the most technical ones. We saw his performance against Carlos Prates, who's also one of the best strikers in the UFC. The man has the touch of death. It doesn't matter if you're outpointing him. It's almost impossible to prevent him from finding your chin over the span of 5 rounds especially. And Ian was able to achieve that. And remember, that time when he almost got finished, it wasn't because Carlos landed his typical left hand. No, Ian Gary shot for a takedown. Carlos scrambled on top, then landed a barrage of ground and pound strikes. And Ian was somehow able to survive that, so props to him. My main point is that when you use MMA math, it's pretty safe to say that MVP is a very, very good striker. And even without the MMA math, I think it would be foolish to say otherwise, right? I do think he's one-dimensional. Usually goes for that right hand, and heck, it's worked for him thus far in his career. No one's been able to figure it out. Even Ian Gary couldn't. And that's why I think MVP would beat a lot of strikers, especially the plotty ones. I believe MVP would probably be JDM, especially if JDM isn't able to pop off with the grappling. JDM is a very good grappler, defensively at least, because he's gone up against so many wrestlers, Basil Hafez, Islam Makhachev, Bilal Muhammad, and against Islam, he was able to defend all of the submissions, and that's something that not a lot of people could do aside from Volk in the first fight. That's the beauty of MMA. Styles make fights. And going back to what I said about MVP not having a really strong argument for being one of the best or most effective strikers of all time, is because of his resume. Let's look at some of the best strikers he's faced. I think they were probably all in his UFC career, that being Kevin Holland, Sher Magomedov, Ian Gary, and Jared Cannonier. Now, the only elite are Ian Gary. Jared Cannonier was too old. Sher Magomedov doesn't really have any notable wins, and Kevin Holland is inconsistent. Compare that to someone like Alex Pereira, who's beat Israel Adesanya, Magomed Ankalaev, Sean Strickland, Yuri Prohaska. I can go on. This dude has a multitude of notable wins. And I just don't think it's fair to even compare these guys. I don't like to use hypotheticals. I like to look at the evidence we've seen in the octagon. And MVP's record is just too thin for us to assert these claims. There's so many other guys in the UFC that have far better resumes. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Israel Adesanya, Peter Yan. I could literally go on for like days about how many fighters have a much better resume than MVP. And I do think he's a very good striker. I do think he's potentially one of the most effective of all time, maybe even number one, because he brings something that a lot of other UFC fighters can't replicate. I think he does it better than Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, but he just hasn't proved it. And that's why I'm not mad at anyone who disagrees with me. I think he potentially does it better than Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira, because they just look a lot more beatable than him on the feet. We've seen so many other guys have success against Alex Pereira, Izzy. Take Kelvin Gastelum. On paper, Kelvin is not that great of a striker, but in his prime, he looked very good. He almost finished Israel Adesanya. If he didn't have negative fight IQ, there's an alternate universe where after he landed a head kick, he went for a finish on the feet, moving into ground and pound. And maybe he would have won, but like I said, I don't like to use hypotheticals, so we'll just have to dream about that forever. Sean Strickland outpointed him for 4 rounds. Robert Whitaker arguably won the second fight, moving on to Alex Pereira. Some guys have been able to have success against him. Israel Adesanya, that just so happens to be a very good striker, so let's overlook that. Khalil Rountree, also a very good striker. He was winning the fight up until he got finished. He even managed to drop him. Bruno Silva was having some competitive striking exchanges with him. Yes, that was in his debut, but still, it happened. Magomed Ankalaev was landing the biggest shots. I could go on. There are times when so many guys had some success against both Alex Pereira and Izzy, whom are viewed as one of the best strikers that have ever stepped foot in the octagon. And that just doesn't happen too often with MVP, aside from his fight against Douglas Lima. The first one, that is. Some people thought that was a fluke, but come on, that's disrespectful to Douglas Lima's game planning. We saw footage of him drilling those low kicks, drilling them, because he knew MVP was going to blitz in, and boom, it landed like magic. But aside from that, I don't think anyone's been able to do that to MVP. Outpointing him just looks impossible. So I really don't know, guys. But you guys let me know, how good is MVP striking? Where would you put him on your list? And don't forget to like and subscribe.